so glad you're with us here on the Clark Howard Show. You know, our mission is to serve you with advice and information that empowers you so you make better financial decisions in your life. And you're not going to believe the story I'm going to begin today's show with. It's a major example of why I despise mandatory arbitration. What a con job on the American people. And also, it's open enrollment for many healthcare plans. And I talked about Medicare last week. But the question for you, if you've got a workplace plan, should you be opting in for an HSA? Well, many times the answer is yes. We'll get into that. But right now, we have something that we used to call a Clark-rageous moment. And it involves a couple who was in a severe crash in an Uber, and they can't sue for their injuries because they had done an Uber Eats order once, and the Uber Eats part of being with Uber says you have no right to sue over anything. This reminds me of the thing recently with Disney, where somebody had done a trial of Disney streaming, and the wife of the couple died at Disney, and the Disney lawyers said, oh no, you can't sue for wrongful death because, well, I mean, you had that trial to Disney streaming and it said you waive all rights to sue in perpetuity. And Disney got so much bad publicity that Disney backed down and said, okay, well, we're going to waive that thing and let you sue us if you want. But corporate America, the automatic rule book with everything is to put you in kangaroo court arbitration. And as I've shared with you in the past, the corporations in America, it's a stacked deck. They all own the arbitrators. They don't literally own them. But the arbitrators only get work if they find regularly for the company. Companies win over 99% of the time in most arbitration forums because it's a kangaroo court. They control it. Now, this is all because of a law that Congress passed roughly 100 years ago, way before there was the internet, way before any of the modern stuff. And this Arbitration Act repeatedly has been interpreted by the courts, including the Supreme Court, to allow companies to basically remove your rights under the U.S. Constitution to a day in court. Now, this was a law that was passed. It's time for Congress to pass a new law that takes away mandatory arbitration. Let me tell you something. If arbitration was voluntary, there'd be many circumstances that businesses would decide to arbitrate, consumers would decide to arbitrate with a company, because in a lot of cases, no one can afford the cost of the lawyers to go to court. And arbitration, if it was a voluntary thing instead of mandatory, it would lead to a whole new thing where the arbitration process was truly a neutral forum, which it's not now. So I hate it, and there's nothing you and I can do about it because it is an unfair circumstance. Because what are you going to do? You're going to tell some giant corporation, no, I'm not signing your terms of service? First of all, nobody even understands terms of service or what you're agreeing to. And they all say, you have read and agreed to. I promise you, you could hand a terms of service for a company to 10 different lawyers, and 10 different lawyers would interpret them differently because they're usually a few hundred pages, and they're all gobbledygook. This is wrong. This is wrong. You know, we've got a problem with American capitalism, and I am totally free market. We have a thing where small businesses are left with all kinds of paperwork burdens and regulation burdens and get fined for this, that, or the other. And big corporations get whatever they want. And that is a problem in arbitration, and the problems with it are just one part of an out of whack, out of balance kind of thing that we need to fix, because I'm so distressed. So many Americans no longer like or trust capitalism. And I think that's terrible. And it's because it's clear the deck is stacked, and it undermines people's faith and belief in the best economic system that's ever existed in humanity, the free market.
Wes in Georgia says...
Am I running for office again?
Oh, stop. Oh, please don't.
Never ran for office, not running.
I want to thank... I think you'd be amazing, but my goodness, that whole field, yikes.
Not my thing.
I want to thank you for suggesting to listeners that they take photos or video of a car before and after a rental. I recently got a bill for over $2,300 from a major rental company with photos showing the car I had rented badly damaged on the entire right side. This was almost 8 weeks after I'd rented the car, and I was close to deleting the photos from my phone. As I had time and date stamped proof that the car did not look that way when I returned it, along with the photo showing the mileage discrepancy, I was able to get it resolved. The claims agent even gave me an email stating the case had been closed. I just wanted to reinforce to you and your listeners that this does happen. I would have been a sitting duck without the photos. And then this came in from Bill in Illinois. When you rent a car and then return it, how long should I keep the video and pictures of that rental?
Well, in theory, the answer's always been 3 months, but I forget to delete them. So I have so many pictures of before and after rental cars. And sometimes if the lighting's right, I shoot video too, because it's crazy. As much as I read every day, I'm seeing news stories over and over and over again about people being charged for damage to a rental car that by their telling they didn't make. And in many cases, they've got the ability to prove they didn't make it, but there's no proof better than just what you heard. You want the odometer reading when you turn it in. The pictures are date stamped. You want pictures of the vehicle or a video showing it, because the car rental agencies act as judge, jury, and executioner, and they'll come back weeks or, as you just heard, 2 months later and say, oh, and they just send you a bill and say you owe us, $8,200 or $2,400 or whatever for something. And if you've got no proof, you are in such a weak position, and you end up in really a terrible place of potentially having to pay money for stuff you didn't do. Oh, one other thing. I learned from an incident that happened at Detroit Airport when I rented a car and the car had damage on the fender, and I got it written on the thing by one of the employees of the company that there was this damage. And then I got billed for $11,000.
Oh.
You remember this?
Mm-hmm.
And boy, I went through it. That's when I started always shooting video and pictures. But now, if the car has damage when I'm leaving a rental plaza, I don't take it. I go get a replacement car. And I had the craziest thing recently. I rented a car in Atlanta, at Atlanta Airport. And the first 2 vehicles I was given, both had damage to them. Both had been in fender benders or whatever. And I go up to the counter the 3rd time, and I thought that woman was going to kill me when I went back to get a 3rd vehicle. But the 3rd one was the charm. It had no damage to it.
All right. Richard in Wisconsin says, my wife and I want to downsize out of our 2-story house. My son has one side of a duplex, all 1 floor, no steps, for sale. He would like about $245,000 for this duplex. Is it legal for me to gift him $18,000 in 24 and $18,000 in 2025? Then in June of 25, my wife and I buy the duplex unit for $209,000. The idea is this way he will have to pay less taxes on the profit of selling the unit.
Right, Richard, I may have missed something. It sounds like your son is living in it. If he's living in it, he has cap gains exclusion, for 125,000, I'd be surprised if he's got profit beyond 125,000 on a $250,000 duplex. Now, if I'm misunderstanding, and because you have a personal exemption, 125 individual, 250 couple, if that's not the situation, he's selling you his side of a duplex that was an investment property for him. You can actually, if you're looking, you think market price 245, and you're looking at 209, there's not enough difference there that it would look like it was not an arm's length transaction. Okay, lawyers, I know what you're saying is I'm committing tax fraud here. Anyway, the only requirement in the law is that something be at a price that would be considered to be within reason for an arm's length transaction. Never make the amount of money, though, that you would gift to your son equivalent to what then there's a reduction in price. In the ballpark's fine, but you should not be dollar for dollar. Second, you give all the money this year because you and your wife can each give anybody 18 grand. So you would do the money this year, but make the reduction in price 30 grand, 40 grand. I mean, don't make it exact. I'm just doing it again, aren't I? But likely, I'm assuming he occupies the place. There's no reason to do any of these shenanigans.
Michael in Oregon says, I've found too many times where businesses encourage and support veterans and active duty military, but when the bottom line shows up, it's actually higher than the regular price. This finally hit the fan for me when I was on a website looking for a rental car, and the price was $84 per day. Wait, I forgot to check my potential veterans discount like Clark told me. And guess what? The website sent me to a different platform that is specifically for my division's travel, my division of the U.S. military's travel, supported by this website, and the price for the same type of car was $150 per day. This occurs too often. The lesson, besides getting corporations to make sure that their offers are true and consistent, is for military and veterans to do their due diligence and always comparison shop, because the patriotic messaging is not always in your best interest.
And by the way, thank you very much for your service in the Air Force. I'm grateful to you for that. On discounts, now you're talking military. This is true with any discount program. I have a credit card that has a thing that promises discounts on different websites, and I find consistently that the price that I get from the websites through their link is higher than I can do not using their link. In fact, I don't even bother with it anymore. So this is a problem with links that supposedly get you a preferred or preferential rate. I've also found that what you said about shopping around is so very important. In my case, I travel constantly, and I'm finding there are enormous differences on quotes for hotels in particular from website to website, including a hotel's own website. Almost always much higher at a hotel's own website than it might be at recognized and reliable third-party sites. But shopping is very, very important, and don't believe that a discount program or discount code somewhere is necessarily going to get you a better deal. And I thank you so much, Michael, for sharing that with us. Coming up ahead, open enrollment at so many employers, either underway or about to be. And we got to talk about one of my favorite tools for long-term financial security, health savings accounts, what role it may play in your life. So today in the United States, over 90% of us have health coverage available through an employer or through the government or whatever. I mean, I think it's the highest percent of Americans have ever had health coverage. So depending on how we get it, we have decisions potentially to make each fall. And open enrollment at many employers is starting about now. And you've got to make choices of health plans. And most people spend about, less than a minute picking their plan for the following year. And if you just as a creature of habit have picked whatever, I want to pitch again why looking at an HSA eligible plan for many of us is the best choice. An HSA eligible plan is an unusual thing. It has a high deductible on your health plan up front. But then once you reach a limit, everything's covered after that. So it means you're your own insurance company for routine stuff through a year and even a little bit bigger expenses each year until you hit that limit, and then you got really nothing to worry about from that point. And that's the whole idea of a high deductible plan, is to try to make you cost sensitive. From the cost sensitive side, it's never really worked because we've never had laws that require medical providers and especially hospitals to quote you firm prices up front, like everything else we do in life. So the second part of it has remained really important. And that is, if a high deductible plan offered by your employer is HSA eligible, it means there are things that are preventative that are covered, and you've got the limits on how much you're exposed to. But it also triggers your ability as an individual to put aside over $4,000 each year. The amount for next year, I think, is $4,300, and for a family, somewhere around $8,500, that you can put aside into an HSA, which is the coolest thing ever. It is a account that you put in before tax dollars that then grow tax-free and then are spent tax-free on eligible medical expenses. So the big play on an HSA plan is to not use the money over the course of the year or years for routine medical expenses. And then that money builds up tax-free over the years. And then later in life, when the overwhelming percent of our medical bills occur anyway, you can then draw on that money and use it to pay the out-of-pockets you'll have for medical care. And you pay it all tax-free. And that money's grown tax-free all through the years. It's better than my Roth IRA that I am basically married to. I love the Roth IRA so much. Who's it best for? For people who have very little medical needs each year, people who have a lot of medical needs for each year. A high deductible HSA eligible plan is awesome. People kind of in the muddy middle, it's harder to choose a high deductible plan. But the ultimate goal is for people who maybe own your own business and you set up an HSA eligible plan, or people who tend to live on less than what you make, and you can afford to pay the medical bills that they occur over the years, you're then able to build up that big amount of money for later in life in that HSA plan. And HSA plans vary a lot in quality. There are ones that are ultra low cost, great for people that are deferring that money through the years. I love the Fidelity offerings as an example. And I do have, if you're thinking of doing this for the first time, you've been doing one and you're using whatever terrible default choice your employer provides for the HSA money, you can go read my briefing on this on Clark.com. Christa?
All right, this first question came in from Jim in Washington. You mentioned that you don't have an HSA, so you probably are not aware of some of the lesser known contribution rules. These are two of my favorites. One, if both you and your spouse are age 55 and older, then you can both make catch-up contributions of $1,000 to the HSA. The caveat is that each spouse must have their own HSA account, so each $1,000 must go into separate accounts. Hopefully our lawmakers will not require separate accounts in the future, but it's that way today. And two, if you're over 18 but under 26 on a parent's or guardian's HSA-eligible health plan and not being counted as their dependent for tax purposes, you are eligible to contribute up to the annual family maximum to your own HSA.
Thank you very much for that. And there's a actual reason a lot of this stuff with HSAs is designed to encourage a spouse to have a separate HSA from their spouse, and that is the prevalence of divorce, and then each has their own HSA already clearly established going forward.
Deb in Texas says, quick question I just need to confirm. Can my hubby contribute $8,000 into his Roth on January 1st, 2025? He turns 50 in October.
Yes, he can. If you turn 50 at any point in a year, from the first day of the year, you're eligible to do catch up on a Roth. And I love when people are thinking, like you're talking about, Deb, putting in the max you can into a Roth IRA.
But would you recommend he puts it all on the first? I mean, I don't know if she means a lump sum or not.
Yeah. All right. So I'm really a fan of dollar cost averaging because it creates habits, and most people need that, where a roughly equal sum goes in every month automatically through the course of a year, up to, if you can do all the way up to the max. But mathematically, and that is a method of dollar cost averaging, mathematically it is better to put the money in on the first day of the year in full if you can afford to, because the investments go up 2/3 of the years, I think it is, or more than 2/3 of the years. So putting it on the first day of the year would hurt you maybe 1/3 of the time, but mathematically over the years, you'll end up with more money by front loading your money going into it instead of doing it over time or doing it at the end of the year.
Daniel in Florida says, a couple of months ago, we went to Rome for a cruise and the airline lost our luggage.
Ugh.
The next morning, we paid £350 for a shuttle to take us to the airport to retrieve it before heading to the cruise port. My wife and I received our luggage.
Pounds.
I know, I think euros. My wife and I received our luggage, but my father-in-law didn't. He had to buy
I'm
clothes,
sorry.
but the airline later reimbursed him. The issue is the airline isn't reimbursing us for the transportation to the airport. If we had waited for them to deliver the bags, they would have had to cover our clothes and essentials in the meantime. By going to the airport ourselves, we essentially saved them money, but we ended up having to pay out of pocket for the shuttle. They say their policy is not to cover transportation, but since we saved them costs on clothes, why can't they cover our shuttle expense? Is there any way to get them to reconsider this?
Well, yeah. First of all, I don't know if this was a U.S. originating flight to Rome, or you were on a ticket, even with a connection in Europe. But if it was a U.S. originating flight, part of the law governing baggage claims includes costs you incur because of the delay in receiving your luggage. And you going to the airport to get the luggage, so you had it for this cruise where you would not have received it otherwise, is actually a perfectly reasonable expense for you to receive. How it costs €350 or who knows, but if it was a U.S. originating flight, you can go online, you'll see under the baggage compensation rules that's the case. File a complaint with the U.S. Department of Transportation. Go back to the airline, let them know you filed a complaint at dot.gov. And, at the airlines, a lot of the responses you get are no longer actually human done, even if a human, a low-level employee is doing it. They're just looking for a canned response that says no. And that's why going to Elliott.org sometimes will be a good idea, where you can see how to contact somebody higher up at the airline to receive the compensation you are due. Now, there's always a lot of ifs, ands, and buts with compensation from airlines, but this is one that, to my knowledge, is fairly clear, that whatever expenses, reasonable expenses involved, because an airline loses your luggage, they are to reimburse. Okay, and this I've got to bring up again. How do I travel the globe? With a carry-on suitcase only. When we used to go on cruises all the time because our son loved them so much, carry-on bag for a week to 10 days. Everywhere I go, carry-on bag. That way it's with me. I don't have to worry about the airline losing it, and the loss rates of baggage have skyrocketed in recent times with the airlines. They have become terrible at providing reliability with checked bags. And think of the insult to injury. Most airlines are charging you to then lose your bag and then not wanting to treat you fairly after they lose it. Carry on, carry on, carry on avoids that. And thank you so much for joining us on today's podcast or YouTube show. I want to mention, because sometimes I'll throw in that our YouTube show keeps growing in popularity. And if you like watching content on YouTube, I hope you will, do you call subscribe to it for YouTube?
Yes.
Just like you would
The
for
channel.
anything else?
It's youtube.com/Clark, and there's lots more than just the podcast.
Yeah,
on
there's
there.
a lot of vignettes that people really enjoy watching. There are times you get to see my full imitation of Crazy Eddie. If you don't know who Eddie Antar was, that I can
Some
get
other
a little.
team members that do some videos too.
Yes, but
Yeah.
I can get a little animated. You get to see that on our YouTube stuff. Or if you've not subscribed to our podcast, but you just happened upon it, know that you can subscribe to it at any podcast site you like. And what is our cost for our YouTube subscription or for our podcast subscription? It's free, because that's my kind of thing. And know what we're about, you learning ways to save more, spend less, and avoid getting ripped off. And see you tomorrow.